Welcome back to the Journeys in Business series. I'm Jess, owner of Jess Creatives, and in this series, I'm sitting down with entrepreneurs to hear about their journeys in business and lessons they have learned. Hey, Brooke, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, so to kick us off, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us about what you do?
Sure. I'm Brooke, as you mentioned, and I'm the founder and editor of Belong Magazine, which is a magazine that celebrates the art and community of blogging, social media, and entrepreneurship for women. It's a fun magazine with a lot of business tips and inspiration and ways to network. And the purpose is really just to help connect women in life-giving ways and take things, from on screen to off screen and just develop relationships.
I love it. Okay, so how long has Belong Mag been around?
About a year and a half.
And then how did you start this? Because this is not just some little oh, here, I have this, I'm putting out a blog post. Some people are
Right.
intimidated by blog posts and you're like, well, I'm going to do a full magazine. So how did you get the idea?
Well, I blogged for several years in my previous life, as I like to call it. I worked in healthcare for nearly 2 decades, and only because of the fact that it was my family's business. And I loved it because it was my family's business and was very passionate about it. But my family decided to sell that business. And I thought, oh, well, I don't want to go do that for someone else.
Yeah.
It's fine doing it for my family, but I don't have the passion or desire really to do that for someone else.
Mm-hmm.
So what do I want to do? And my education, my background from college was creative writing, graphic design, and photography. And so I kind of thought, well, I still really like those things. I'm very interested in those things. And I spent all this time blogging while working in healthcare. And I was so frustrated by blogging because it's just like being an introvert offline. If you're an introvert online, you're not going to meet people, right?
Yeah.
It's really hard. But it's even I'm almost more so because you have to figure out what groups there are and what niches there are. And the internet is just so big that it's very hard to find where you fit in. And it's, because there is a place to fit in and there's a place for everybody, but you can't and you shouldn't want to fit in everywhere. That's just overwhelming too.
Right.
So the idea kind of came from this sense of me feeling lost on the internet and thinking I cannot be the only one. There's all these creative women out there that are looking to connect, and the internet is such a beautiful place and a beautiful medium to do that. So how can I facilitate that and make it look pretty?
Yeah.
And use, some of the things that I love and enjoy. And obviously you could do it online, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's always that option, but as a lot of creative entrepreneurs and creatives in general roll, something tangible is really helpful. And having something to hold in your hand to thumb through. I'm a very tactile learner. So being able to have something in my hands that I can look at and kind of interact with in a more sensory way is really helpful for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, and I'm also just a magazine hoarder, but so I thought, well, a magazine would be a really cool idea. And then, of course you think, well, there's all these rumors and all these things, all these people saying, well, print is dying, print is dead, blah, blah, blah. And so I did some research on that. And, there's certainly the case to be made, that things are changing, but print is not dying. It's not dead.
No.
There's always going to be a place for the print magazine. And, we do provide both the print and the digital, but 95% of the readers prefer print.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where it came from, is just this desire to curate the internet a bit, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I know it sounds kind of silly, sure, you can go find a blog post about this here or that there, but there's just something to be said about somebody putting it all together for you in one spot, and you not having to do the work, and then just getting to kind of enjoy it. And it's pretty, and it's satin pages, they feel nice. And so that's kind of why and where it began.
Yeah. And were you just printing it locally when you started?
I wasn't printing it locally. I had found a company online that I used, but we quickly had issues there and I switched. So we're on our third printer, but I think we found a good one and a sweet spot, and we're going to stick with this one for a while.
Yeah, that's good. I totally relate with having to kind of switch vendors. Like, I don't do a ton of print design, but when I do, I have like my go-to vendors, because
Yeah.
I went through that, like, okay, nope, that didn't work.
Yep. Well,
So,
and it's the balance of the pricing, the service,
mm-hmm.
the quality. It's so many different. I mean, when you're an entrepreneur and you're thinking, okay, there's shipping costs, and there's all these added things that go into considering even what vendors you're going to use.
Yeah.
That, there's some trial and error that you have to go through, but thankfully, I think that like I said, I think we found a sweet spot, and I mean, to be in all honesty, the only downside about the current printer that we use is that to keep the rates low for printing, they only ship to one location for each order. Well,
Uh,
I then so I end up with the poor FedEx man with, with multiple pallets of boxes of magazines in my garage. Like, he's pulling them into my garage, and then I have to turn around and ship them again
yeah.
to distributors for Barnes and Noble. But again, like, even when you add those costs in and such, like, it still makes more sense for us to do it that way. And at some point it may not. And, you kind of have to roll with the punches and figure out what works best each time. But so that's the small sacrifice that I have to pay to work with this printer that I like. But it's a little funny, and I do feel bad for the FedEx man, because he delivers them on a pallet and then he comes back the next day and he has to take all of these individual boxes and load them back.
Oh my gosh.
Because I have to relabel them all, so I can't keep them on the pallet. So yeah, just funny. Sorry, side note.
No, that's fun. And hopefully, in like 10, 20 years, you can be like, remember when we used to load up the pallets in the garage? And like, it'll be just like a fun little memory. Make sure you are like taking pictures of like, so you can like scrapbook this or have like a flashback like episode, like in your,
you said, the remember when. Because every entrepreneur has those, right?
Yes.
And sometimes you don't outgrow that, and that's okay too. And we may not. We may hit a point where we plateau, and that's fine, and it stays in the garage. But it is really funny though to see. You're like, they really go from the printer like into my garage, and then
like literally.
Yeah.
That's funny. So you mentioned Barnes and Noble. So how did you get your magazine into Barnes and Noble? Because that's super awesome.
Yeah. So the distribution aspect, and keep in mind, I have no history in the publishing world whatsoever. So, when we're talking about creatives and entrepreneurs, like, I know many of us are like flying by the seat of our pants, figuring it out as we go. And I am right there with everyone. No clue what I'm doing when it comes to printers, anything. So the Barnes and Noble thing, distribution obviously is very important for a magazine.
Yeah.
And though, you can try to do it where you're solely distributing it through your website online, it's, people want it to be more accessible. And as far as like the legitimacy of your publication, it makes a big difference when it's available elsewhere.
Yeah.
So with Barnes and Noble, you kind of have to do a little, do a little research and figure it out, and like the rabbit hole of click through everything.
I can only imagine.
Yeah, but ultimately everything goes through their distributor. They have a distributor that handles all of their magazines. And then you basically have to apply and like send a magazine and your application and a check. Like, it's a financial investment just to have them look at your piece. And then they send it through their committee, the distributor does, to see whether or not it's something they would even want to present to the Barnes and Noble, like their team. And then there's like regional salespeople for Barnes and Noble that then will look at it and determine if they think it's a good fit for their region and which stores and how many. So it's a process.
Yeah.
And I feel like we're really, really fortunate to be able to get our third issue on the shelves. That was huge, and it's kind of surreal, and it's still kind of surreal to have people send messages. Or somebody posted on Instagram recently, and I just loved it. She was like, and I saw my girl's magazine in the back at Barnes and Noble, and I pulled to the front, and I was ooh, it's just like right there next to like Self and all these other women's interest magazines.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it's really rewarding.
Yeah. Do you are you in are you in a bunch of different states, or mostly in California?
In every state.
So I'm gonna go hunt down Belong Mag and Barnes and Noble.
What's been really exciting so we're about to release issue 7, is that they've steadily increased the number that they want, and they just increased it again another 50%. So now there are 3,000 issues that are being sent. I know it sounds like a really tiny number to a lot of people, but when you start with your first issue printing 200, and a year and a couple of months later you're printing over 4,000, like that's 1,000% growth.
Yes, that's huge, amazing. Right? Yeah.
So we small business owners can celebrate, and I forget so often to even celebrate that. Like, that's not just a little win, that's like a big win. And I'm really excited about that. And I don't say that, please do not take that as me bragging. I'm just trying to express that often we don't celebrate those things, and we're like, oh, well, it's not here yet, or it's not there yet, or whatever. So at this point, I don't think that it's in every single store, but it's getting closer. And I think they have 600 stores, and I believe it's in 450 of them.
Nice.
So we're getting there.
I love it. Yeah. Okay, well, luckily I'm, outside of Atlanta. So hopefully I'm
Atlanta stores that do have them.
Yes. Okay, well, I'm going to go on a scavenger hunt and find one of these magazines. I mean, I've ordered a copy before from you, I think way before Barnes and Noble, but it would be really cool to be like, I know her. Like, that's so cool. And it's a big accomplishment. I mean, to be, especially on your third issue. And I think it is important to celebrate all those all those steps of growing.
Whether big or little. Yeah. I mean, I think that we so often, we get so caught up in I'm not making enough of a profit yet, or, whatever the case is, whatever it is that, we're always looking to the next thing. And so often we skim over like I said, even the big wins, we skim over them so quickly because we're too quick to get on to the next thing.
Yeah.
And, so sometimes it takes verbalizing it and talking with other people to say, wait a minute, no, it was like a really big deal, and I should be proud of that. And just other people who, that are out there doing things, they're out there, photographing things and creating design and being, anytime you finish like a full website design, like that's huge. Like, I can't do that. And like, that's so much effort and beauty and talent that you've put into something like that like you should be so proud. Mm-hmm. So I think that we forget, and we're so like, oh, well, I have 3 more I have to do, and I'm behind. And we're like, wait a minute, take a step back and think, look at what I've done. This is what you made. Like, that's huge, and it's going out into the world. And you should be so proud.
Yeah, especially I think for me, like as many websites as I have done or do, and I don't mean that in a bragging way, but like sometimes it's like crazy to think of how many websites I've done already. And sometimes it's like, okay, like launch, yay, like done. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I forget like how huge it is for the other person.
Yes.
Like they're like, oh my gosh, like, because a lot of my clients are newbies or like or they're not brand new, they're like 1 to 2 years in. And so for them, it's like a huge step. They just invested a lot of money, put in all this work, and I know for a lot of people, it's scary. Like, I'm putting myself out there. Like, this is happening.
It's official.
Yeah. And sometimes I forget how special it is to them. And like, so I just try to remind myself of like,
that's encourage them.
Yeah, like it's an honor. And I always remind myself, like, I know a lot of people talk about like, what's your why? And, that kind of thing. And I remember for a long time being like, I'm just a designer. Like, I don't, like, I make logos and websites. Like what I don't, I'm not like a life coach changing lives, but then I remembered like when I'm doing a logo or a website, that could potentially be like the launch pad for their business. Like,
are you kidding? Like I look at what my designer has done. So I work with the designer, and she came up with, I gave her ideas for what, like the logo kind of in my head. And because I have a background in graphic design,
yeah,
but without totally blowing my age myth, it was pre-digital. And so like, we didn't use, I don't know how to use the Adobe products. Like, and so the learning curve would have been so big for me to do that I knew right off the bat that I was going to need help with that. And I mean, she is the one that took what I kind of had in my head of like, kind of thought maybe would work, but I couldn't make it happen. And she created something even better.
Yeah.
And that's like she made the Belong brand what I wanted it to be, but couldn't do. And so that's such a great example of like Belong wouldn't look like it looks without her. So I didn't do that. She's the behind the scenes person, and she doesn't get the credit for doing that, but she is like the lifeblood of the behind the scenes, And so I think that, it's so easy to skim over that stuff and think, oh, well, it was just a logo, but like, you're the lifeblood of that brand. Like that's what's representing them. And you helped create that, and you helped establish that for that entrepreneur. And that's really, really something special.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So what is your favorite part about what you get to do?
I love being able to put together something that's pretty, that genuinely helps and inspires women. Not just something pretty that's a gimmick that just wants, I just want you to buy this because it looks nice or whatever. Right. I think those are cool too. And I get suckered into buying those all the time also. But it really is nice to, and I think everyone loves to get positive feedback, and it is constantly a reminder that I'm headed in the right direction. When I get those notes from women saying, I found the magazine and it was just what I needed to keep going.
Yeah.
Or, and I'm thinking, okay, that's why I'm doing it. Just like, it's confirmation that I am on the right track.
Yeah.
That's really my why, like helping inspire them, helping connect women, just giving them the resources they need. And again, I know a lot of it's available online, but this is just a different form, and it hits people in a different way.
Yeah. How do you go about like curating all the content for the magazine?
That's a good question. So usually each issue has a general theme, just to kind of help tie it together a little bit better. And then from there, I try really hard to keep it, I try to allow like contributors from all ends of, all parts of the spectrum. So people who are just starting out that really are maybe niched and have like some really great tips, or, they're an expert at one area. Like I want them to have a space where they can also share their expertise, but then also have women who have been doing things for years and years and years share theirs. Yeah. So I try to be very deliberate about like including people from all across the spectrum, because I don't want it to feel like a popularity contest. Like, oh, well, you have to have been doing this forever and you have to be well known. And there's a balance to be had. I mean, there's obviously people who have been doing it for years and years and years, have some really great content to share, which is why they've been doing it for so long, right? They've been successful. So they obviously have something, but I also want it to be a place for women who maybe are, not quite that far down the road, where they also feel like they can share their expertise and that they matter. So I look at that, and then I really do. I look for people who, share a similar vision, when I look at their work or their accounts, that it represents something that Belong can stand behind as well.
Yeah.
That it looks like they again share some of the same, values and whatnot. And then I honestly, like, I really love to find things that are a little bit different, that are fresh. And that's actually really hard to do. So, it's something that I'm working more and more toward, and encouraging more and more people to be like when they say niche down, like same thing, like come up with something really creative.
Yeah.
Something different, a different angle. It can be about branding, but not like, how does your brand tell a story? Like do something different with it, like come at it from a different angle, give it a fresh spin. It's still like learning about branding is still extremely important, but maybe we can talk about it in a different way.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I look for. We don't always get exactly that, but that's where I start from. Okay. Like, so the issue that's coming out next week is care and collaboration. And it's a very broad topic. I mean, it could be caring for your clients. It could be caring for yourself. It could be caring for your business. So it's pretty wide open, but like seeing how people could come at that with, creative ideas is kind of how we pulled it together.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a fun, but kind of difficult process in some ways. But yeah, so that's pretty much how we do it. The submissions come in online. Sometimes I'll have conversations with individuals that, we'll be talking and I'm like, oh my goodness, that needs to go in.
Yeah.
Like put that in words on paper and we need to incorporate that. But yeah, I usually take a lot of content from the submissions that come in from our form online.
That's awesome. I really, really love and appreciate that you are including people of all different, like on both sides of the spectrum. Cause like, I know a lot of people, even I have felt like I've been turned down on podcasts because I don't have enough followers. Like I'm not an influencer. And like, I totally get whether it's a magazine, a guest blog, or a podcast, like you have to be a little bit picky about what you include and the content and that kind of thing. But I think there's a lot to be said for people who are still early on because they do probably have that fresh perspective that you mentioned.
Well, and when you're looking at someone's like Instagram account, I mean, you can look at the followers first, but if you're looking at their account, like the content of their account, you can get a feel for whether or not they have a grasp on what it is that they're trying to like share with your audience.
Yes.
So like, like visually the aesthetics, like is their Instagram consistent? Is, do they look like they have their act together as far as, a woman in business? Like you can get that without having thousands of followers.
Yes.
Or even hundreds of followers. Like, so it's just, in that sense, it takes time for me to kind of like go, and I do look at everyone that submits, I go and I look at all of their accounts, and so what, you don't have a Facebook page, whatever, I don't really care. Like I look at the website, like, even though I have like, please fill that in, like I look at it, I do have it, but it's not like a requirement. But, I look at all the different accounts to kind of see what your overall story is and what it is that you're sharing, and how professional is it? And would you be someone that people would want to seek out outside of the magazine as far as like continuing?
Yes.
I want it to be a continuing resource.
Love that.
Yeah. So it's a form of diversity in another way, right?
Yeah.
Like we look for diversity, when it comes to age and race, and obviously sex is a little bit rough. We do have a couple of men who've done some photography, but for the most part, it's a magazine for women, by women.
Yes.
But, other than that, like, I look at that as an aspect of the diversity piece that we can be a little bit more active in, that, a boss lady doesn't have to be someone who's been doing this for a long, long time.
Absolutely. So if you could go back and tell yourself something for that first like week, that first month, what would you tell yourself?
Oh, I would say that you need to do the business of business. You need to, I mean, the ideas are great and the inspiration is fun and you get excited, but don't get ahead of yourself. Take time to invest in the business side of the business before you get too far along. And I'm sure, I mean, people say this all the time. And as a baby entrepreneur, I was like, yeah, whatever. And, I'm like, oh, crud. When you get to a certain point, you're like, I totally should have done that. I totally should have just opened that checking account. Or I should have, hired the attorney for $500 to help me establish my LLC. It seems like such a huge, huge thing at the forefront. Like $500 is a lot of money when you're not making anything.
Yeah.
And even when you are making something,
when you are, it's a lot.
So, but like when it comes down to, you know, depending on what it is that you're doing, having the protection of having the LLC in place,
Yeah.
it is priceless. So, and learning from the very get-go to keep the money separated, like that really streamlines your processes when it comes to bookkeeping and, you know, just all of those little things. I really wish that I had taken time to, like I said, do the business of the business earlier on.
No, but that's so true. And it is hard to, like, especially in those first few years when you're starting out, the money might not be very much or very consistent. And people are like, you need to buy this, you need to get this course, you need to be an LLC. And it's like, how do I make all this happen? How do I like afford this?
You know, and I'm sure that everyone has their own like top 5 or whatever things that you need to do. And it does depend to some degree on what your business is. Obviously, if you're looking to go into like, you know, something design related, you're going to have to invest in the software products that you know, you need to do that. Like that's a necessity. Whereas for someone like me, that's not a necessity.
Yeah.
But establishing, you know, the groundwork as far as, you know, the learning to keep the money separated, and the forming the, you know, the LLC, if that's the direction that you want to go. Like, I feel like a complete idiot having not done those things earlier on. And then, I mean, there's things that I'm still, like we were saying, I'm still figuring things out as I go. I'm like, oh, I was supposed to do that. Like,
yeah.
I didn't know. I mean, you don't know until you don't know. And then you know, and you're like, oh, crud. But yeah, so there's only so many things one can do. Those for me were probably the top 2. Just like I said, having somebody help me with the LLC because I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah.
And it's just too important to skim over. And then actually taking the time just to drive up to the bank. Like,
yes.
we're busy, right? Like, and it doesn't seem like an important thing, but actually taking the time to do that has made things way easier than I thought. And
yes,
it was worth the time.
Yeah. I like, having my business account separate because then I can really see, like, for me, it's nice to, because it's almost like I have a savings account. So I'm able to pay myself consistently. And then whatever, like, even if I make $1 million, I'm still, you know, paying myself this much. And then the leftover just stays there. And it's like, that's how I help pay for taxes every quarter and buy the fonts and all the other in between stuff. And that makes it just really easy, especially, of course, when it comes to tax time. And then like keeping all that for real. Like, it is a stressful ordeal. I do not enjoy taxes. Like, that's probably I would rather have to deal with like unhappy clients than like deal with taxes. Like,
that's funny.
Like, I mean, luckily I don't often have unhappy clients, but the occasional like just little thing, I would much rather deal with that than taxes, because it's just
and you realize when tax time comes up, you're like, oh no, I should have been tracking X, Y, or Z. And that's when, at least having, you know, I even noticed, you know, like when I, you know, all the different things that you subscribe to, like, you know, Later or ConvertKit or MailChimp or whatever, like once I have those hooked up to the business account, like it's easier to see because they get just, I mean, how many stupid little debit card charges do I have on my regular account? Like, so, but like all of those, they get like mixed in, and it's so much easier, and it's just a much, like you said, a much clearer picture of where things actually are, than having it was such a mess that I've been so thankful to be able to be like, okay. And even when I go out, like if it's you know, a business meeting, lunch, coffee, whatever, I'm like, I can use the business card to pay for this and not have to deal with like all of the other, you know, like oh wait, do you have to do an expense report? I don't know. It's just,
like, I don't know.
It's like you paying me. I don't know. Like, I don't even know. What am I supposed to do?
Yeah.
So it just simplifies that process.
So speaking of like these things you wish you had kind of done beforehand, if you were starting over tomorrow, like completely fresh, what would you do differently?
I would, well, the one thing that I did I did a pilot issue, which was great. And then I wish that I had right then been like, okay, it's okay to work on the pilot issue and put the business stuff in place. Like I don't have to wait. Like I felt like I had to wait until I had something to show for it before I could actually be a business. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, so instead of waiting, like I feel like that was backwards. Like it's okay to go ahead and, do the LLC, like if you're committed to it. If you're just like dabbling in it for a hobby, that's one thing, right?
Yeah.
And especially in California, where if you're an LLC, you have an $800 a year tax that you have to pay, which is killer.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. That is totally prohibits some people from doing it altogether. But I wish that I had taken time to really kind of sort out those things and sought out help, or there's so many free webinars and things that I probably could have listened to, but I just got caught up in the excitement and didn't consider those things, which, and I wish that I had started using like contracts and agreements early on, but again, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah. It's a learning process.
Yeah. So those are things that, you don't think of, but I wish that I had them all in place right off the bat.
Yeah. I think I know a lot of people talk about like, oh, like, well, you have to treat your business like a business and not a hobby and all that kind of stuff. And I think when people are starting out, like you said, sometimes it's like, well, I feel like I need to have something to prove I'm a business. But I think if you're committed on the inside, then like that's what matters,
right?
And like start on the right foot, and then you will start treating your business like
exactly.
a business and not a hobby.
You're exactly. It's like you're setting yourself up, and in your mind you've made it legitimate. So you've committed, you've invested in it, and it's not like this is gonna work. Like now said, this is what I'm going to do. Yeah, definitely.
It took me a while to become an LLC, because at first I was like, when I first started freelancing, it was just a freelancing. I wasn't trying to become a business. And then as I started to do it more, I, first of all, didn't really know it was something I should do, because when I was really getting started, Facebook groups weren't as huge of a thing. I was only in like one Facebook group, didn't know any other entrepreneurs at all. And so I was totally foreign concept of like be an LLC. And I guess I've realized I wasn't the type of person who Googles like how to start an online business or like I just was learning. I was like, I'm going to design stuff and here.
Well, then you're right. Your journey is a little different because of the fact that, sometimes you do start doing things kind of like on the side, and, not until you get to a point do you realize, oh, wait, like I'm doing a lot of stuff consistently on the side. Maybe I should consider taking this, a little bit more seriously as far as a business. And, I would say that you did it probably exactly right? Like you don't want to invest all that time, energy, and money in establishing an LLC if you don't even know, like you didn't even know you needed to be one, because you were just doing your thing.
I was just doing my thing. Yeah. And there was also a point in my journey where it was like, okay, I either need to scale back because it's like taking up too much time and it's on the side, or I really need to pursue this, know that I'm going to have to work like long hours, nights and weekends and that kind of thing to be able to take it full time. Like there was kind of that point where I was like, okay, am I going to do this? Like actually am I going to do I want to work towards working for myself? Thankfully, I said yes to myself.
Yeah, thankfully.
Thankfully. Not sitting in a cubicle anymore. But you have to take yourself in your business seriously at some point.
Yeah.
Hopefully early on, but it's just part of the process. And
it is part of the process.
There's a lot of learning.
Different. It obviously looks different for everyone.
Oh yeah.
And like you said, even when you're just starting, like, and you're doing freelance or whatever, like you're not thinking I should go Google how to start a freelance business, right? Like you're just doing the work.
Yeah.
Or you're a knitter and you're knitting hats and, whatever. And like, you're not thinking, oh, I'm starting a new business. You're just doing your thing. So, it looks a little different for everyone. In my case, I think because I was creating a magazine and like, I knew where I wanted it to go. Like I probably should have been a little smarter about it. But like you live, you learn. And so I did. And thankfully now we're an LLC and have insurance and all the other good stuff and a checking account.
The best part. Yes. Love that. So what are you working on for 2017?
Our regular issues, we are doing a special weddings and celebrations this year. Yeah. And actually we're going to continue it into next year as well. Just because I think that in the entrepreneurial world that we're in, there's a very large population of women who are in some way connected to that and just, that industry, because it's a very big industry.
It is.
I mean, we're talking graphic designers who maybe specialize in, in helping women who are wedding planners or florists or whatever. So I feel like, it's pretty to look at, and there's some really great information to be shared about, more specifically kind of into that industry. That's actually, a lot of it's applicable to everyone, but it's, it's kind of fun to showcase something like that. So we're doing that. But we have, issue 7 is coming out at the end of March, and that's the Karen collaboration issue, which is really great. I'm excited about it. I love the theme. But then, so then there's the weddings issue, weddings and celebrations. I didn't want it to be specific to only weddings, but that's coming together. And then we have 2 other issues for the year that are going to be rolling out. We're trying to add some events and things. But as a solopreneur or whatever you call that, as I am, one can only do so many things.
Yes.
So, and since the magazine itself is sort of the basis for what Belong is, that obviously takes priority.
Yeah.
And I still have, I still work another job. So, that sort of throws a wrench into things.
Yeah, that kind of takes up a little more time as well. So where can we connect with you online and learn more about the magazine?
You can connect with me at belong-mag.com, and on social media across the board, it's Belong Mag. So Instagram, Pinterest, Facebook, all over.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yay. Well, thank you so much for chatting with me today.
Thanks for having me. It was fun.